Hello and welcome to this episode of Futures, the podcast series brought to you by CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of CIPS Futures. My name is Matthew Rock. I'm part of the content team at CIPS and delighted to host this conversation today. What we're going to do is we're going to sit in one of those 360 video booths and we're going to look back 10 years and we're going to look forward 10 years and we're going to spin around and see where we get to. And there's a good reason for this. We want to look back to 2015 and we want to look forward to 2035 and beyond, because we are joined today by the long-standing chair of CIPS Global Board of Trustees, Alison Barto, who has been on the board for the past 10 years and served as chair for the past 3 years. And Alison is stepping down, so we thought it was a great moment to talk with her about the past 10 years and what's changed for the profession and cast our eyes forward and think about, some of the exciting things that are coming down the track. So that's the purpose of today. Alison, hi, how are you?
Hey, Matthew, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. And looking forward to having this chat with you, Alison. I mean, when I was thinking about this, I was reflecting on the world of 2015 and just thinking how different that was. That was a world of, pre-President Trump, pre-Brexit. There was no such thing as TikTok. I mean, it was a completely different world. And so I think it's important in that context to think about how much can change over 10 years and how much might change over the next 10 years. And these are some of the things that we wanted to reflect on today. And Alison we're going to take some quite punchy questions on, think about the profession in this context. But I just wanted to start really, Alison, by talking about you personally. As I said, you've served on the board for the past 10 years. Chair for the past 3 years. When you think back over the past decades, personally, what have been the changes for you in that time?
Yeah, wow. I mean, if you think about it, like you said, that was pre-Brexit, pre-COVID. And for me, that was pre-motherhood as well. So over those 10 years, I've had a little boy. And I think having kids brings a very different perspective on your life, to be honest. And if I reflect back over the last 10 years for me, I mean, not only am I a mum, but also my whole working career has changed. So I've obviously did many years, 20 odd years in HSBC, and I've moved from a large corporate and been very much part of that corporate environment into my day-to-day job now, as well as the CIPS work that I do. I'm part of a startup called Carbonaires. So actually working from a large corporate to moving to a startup has been quite different. It's a lot more dynamic. My involvement in different parts of the business is very varied, from fundraising to procurement. So that in itself has been very different. I'm a lot more, Carbonaires is in the carbon removal business. So I'm a lot more into sustainability, understanding what's happening to the planet as part of climate change. And despite what Trump says, climate change is very real. There's lots and lots of scientific evidence that shows that climate change is real. I think those of us who live in this world of climate change and handle it day to day appreciate there is some negative rhetoric out there, but kind of life is moving on and most people in the industry are doing what they need to do to save the planet. That's another thing I think that's changed since I've been a mum. You realise you want to leave the planet in a good state for your kids and your grandkids. I think probably the most life-changing event for me in the last 10 years was a few years ago. I had heart problems and hadn't realised how serious they were until a doctor said to me, "You're not leaving the hospital until you have a pacemaker fitted." So 3 years ago, in my 40s, I had a pacemaker fitted. And I tell you what, it does make you realise that life is quite short and you never quite know what's around the corner. And because of that, I've changed and adjusted some of the way I do things. I'm really up for kind of making a difference now. And I'll come on to you, I know later on we'll talk about the chair role, but we're making a difference in everything you do, not settling to stay in the slow lane so that you're not, I would say probably since then, I wouldn't say I'm plodding along. I'm driving everything at 100 miles an hour. And I really feel that, everything I need to do in life it needs to be important and make a difference. and that I leave a legacy behind. And that has changed dramatically over the last 10 years and kind of my thoughts around what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Thank you, Alison. And thank you for sharing those personal challenges that you've had. So thinking about the profession this time, when you look back over the last decade, what do you think has changed most for the procurement and supply chain profession?
I think it's changed significantly. The times of procurement purely being driven on price and saving targets, I think are almost diminishing. Look, trying to understand resilience in supply chains is now critical in our disruptive world. It's all well and good when you're saving a few cents over here, but actually if you can't get it supplied and you stop the whole business is significantly more important. So understanding resilience in supply chains, the world is getting more and more disruptive, whether that's due to war, drones over airports, extreme weather conditions, whatever it is. We have to live in this disruptive world, which probably, I said 10 years ago, might have been a bit of disruption, but nothing to the degree that we're seeing these days. And therefore, procurement organizations have no choice. They have to be more strategic and they have to be more connected. So, sticking to just negotiating on price is no longer acceptable. They have to be part of driving key decisions within a business. And I think most teams realize that. Most teams realize that what we source from our suppliers and understanding the supply chain is critical to delivering on any business at all. And therefore, understanding those ecosystems is really important. So at one stage, if we were just negotiating contracts and writing commodity strategies, great. But we now have to start thinking about driving business growth as well. And that includes everything from co-innovation with suppliers. So understanding what suppliers are doing around different products and innovation, building ecosystems, possibly building like joint ventures with suppliers, understanding how you would run that business. And then, of course, incorporating AI into everything we do. And AI is going to be a great tool for everybody. I use it all the time for helping review contracts, helping review RFPs, helping review proposals that we send out. It's great. It has its limitations, and I'm a big believer you need a human in the loop, but we have to be able to evolve into a lot more strategic and building up relationships and partnerships with suppliers.
Some of the language that you use there is very different, and the language of co-innovation and the language of resilience. Are enough procurement and supply chain professionals sort of adapting themselves, in your view? You meet a lot through your work with CIPS and with others. Are those views that you've just espoused, are they being taken up widely enough in the profession, do you think?
I think they are. There are some fantastic role models out there. So, some of the individuals that I interact with on a regular basis are great role models and are connecting into the business and are driving the business forward. So, the few examples, Ninian at Vodafone, Amanda at Mars, they're connecting into their CEOs day in, day out, and they are helping drive the strategy of those businesses. And so I think my view of the years ago when we used to have conversations on is procurement at the right level and are they sat at the right table? And I believe we're there. I believe in it. And if those who aren't need to be a little bit more forceful and just put themselves right at the leadership table and say, I'm sitting here. We drive key decisions. We are part of this strategic decision-making group, leading like cross-functional teams. If they're not doing that, they should be doing that. But I think the majority are. And the conversations I'm having with certainly CPOs and at other levels, that they are key decision makers in that business. Key decision not only around the costs of the business, but around the growth strategy of the business as well, because they understand both sides. It's not just a case of trying to drive operational efficiencies. It's also how do you drive the growth of the business. They're starting to think more proactively. In fact, I had a conversation recently with a procurement individual around how do they set up horizon scanning with AI. And what they mean by horizon scanning is they operate in a very regulated environment on a multinational basis. How do they get ahead of those regulations? Even before the regulations go live, how do they understand whether our consultations are on regulations? So how do they scan that horizon? How do they bring that information back into the business And how do they then proactively drive changes in the business? So they're not waiting for those regulations to happen. They're actually proactively ahead of the regulations or ahead of any changes in the market. So therefore, they're not on a reactive basis. They're actually driving decisions on a proactive basis so that the business itself is ahead of the game and typically ahead of its competitors. Because there's lots of companies that are not doing this kind of horizon scanning. But the fact that we're starting to think more proactively about a business and not reacting to something that's happened, then that's a very, very different way of considering how procurement acts in business.
Yeah, it's fascinating that the idea of the procurement professional as the person that brings new insight into the business is a very exciting one. I was struck, you mentioned Ninian Wilson, who leads procurement at Vodafone. I was struck when he spoke at the CIPS Futures conference this year. He asked the audience, how many people in this audience have spoken within the last 2 weeks to a startup? And hands went up, and that was good. But his message was, look, that is your role, to be exploring the outside world and bringing that innovation and those ideas into the business. And that's what you're describing again there. It's an exciting opportunity.
It is. And having that, contingency planned, having it ready, if something happens in the market, building relationships, being proactive is where we need to be.
I wanted to take you back to when you joined the board of trustees at CIPS. When you did start that role, you were not initially chair, you became chair later on. But what changes did you want to bring about when you joined? And do you think some of them will be long lasting? Assess the impact that you've made for us?
It kind of goes back to where I started. That I'm someone who always wants to make a difference. It's been a fabulous experience. We're a group of volunteers who meet every quarter. We've obviously seen a lot of changes in the organisation. I'll be very honest, when I took the role of chair at CIPS, I knew what I was getting into. I already had a vision in my head that the organisation needed to change. Look, and it wasn't just me. I'm very connected into a number of the board members, but I knew we needed to change. I don't think CIPS at that time was servicing its members sufficiently. There was significant challenges. We weren't meeting any expectations. When I took the role as chair, that's when we had issues. We were having all sorts of IT issues, and we knew we needed to fix it fast. So I knew I went into the chair role with my eyes open. I knew that we needed to make some significant changes. We did a review, and I've seen it over the years, but we did a review of the business, and we realized the business, CIPS as a small business, we were making it too complex to run. Just to put it in perspective, we had 14 different membership types. We had 27 different pricing groups. We over 237 countries. And if you took a combination of all of those, we pretty much had, and I kid you not, about 1 million different combinations of how we serviced a member. Just ridiculous. So we were trying to run an organization, which actually isn't a huge organization. It's about 200 employees. But it was just, we were trying to make it too complicated. And by doing that, we actually weren't servicing the members properly. So then I think the members were starting to feel that. So I knew when I went into the role, I wanted to drive some changes, and that needed to change. So one of the first things we did was restructure. And we had to make, and look, I'm well aware we've had to make some pretty tough decisions along the way on what does simplification and restructuring look like. So we restructured the organization. We've simplified it. We will get to the point where there are 3 membership models as opposed to 14 and 27 different pricing groups. And then the 2 things that I always said I wanted to do was make CIPS more accessible to a significant larger community and make CIPS more relevant. I was conscious that a lot of the materials we used and a lot of the speak that we were using with our members was very old-fashioned. And going back to what we were saying previously, Matthew, around where procurement was 10 years ago and where procurement is now is very different. And therefore, we were still using terminology and webinars and everything that was probably a little outdated. So we needed to do a lot of this refresh. So we simplified it. That's made things significantly better for the team, a lot simpler to run, a lot simpler to kind of get things done. So we can move a lot faster. We become a lot more agile as an organization. And then going back onto the membership piece and making it more accessible, we've reduced, I said, the type of memberships going forward, but we've also now created a CIPS community. And you can join as a CIPS community member without being a full member of CIPS. And that's about to be rolled out as well. So that means we can make CIPS significantly more accessible to a much wider community. And actually, CIPS itself, whilst it is the voice of the profession, procurement in most cases can report either into CEO, into COO, or into the CFO, depending on whether it goes into finance operations or a direct line. But that in itself opens up a much wider community. Why aren't we talking to the CFOs? Why aren't we talking to the CEO and the operation teams? And why don't they understand the procurement world? So my view is you have to open it up to a much larger community so that we can have a much greater influence. So we've done that. That's great. So that's made it more accessible. We've also, one of the things I think has been a super positive impact was we have just in the last 2 weeks moved out of Eastern House and into new offices space in West Point and Peterborough. And Eastern House was beautiful. It was a fabulous old building in a great grounds. It was obviously built as a private home initially. So everybody was in different rooms, almost like little bedrooms. It was terrible for collaboration. Terrible. So I don't believe we were providing the CIPS staff the right environment to, as I said, to simplify this and create greater collaboration. So by moving into West Point, we've created a much more functional space, created a lot more flexibility. You can see it in the collaboration between the teams, but also we want to use that space to collaborate with members. So if members, want to come up to Peterborough and meet the team, great. We've got plenty of space now that we can host events. We can meet members. If members are in Peterborough doing meetings or nearby, welcome to pop in. And that just drives a very different kind of communication methodology between us and the members. Look, Ben Farrell has obviously gone in as CEO, and Ben has been amazing on getting out to meet members across the globe. And we're not previously I think we were quite UK centric. We've made a very active move to say we're a global organization. So Ben has been out meeting members, but I think the fact that we've got West Point as well and we can host members is great for us. So that has made a big change. The thing I'm probably most proud of is previously we had CIPS Foundation set up, but due to financial constraints, we had paused funding into the CIPS Foundation. We have turned, and I believe in the last 3 years under my tenure, we've turned the organization around so it's significantly more profitable. And because we are a charity, we funnel those profits into our CIPS Foundation. So this is the benefits of for members, unlike maybe some of our competitors that aren't in this charity space. We have revitalized the CIPS Foundation. And I said it had almost come to a grinding halt. And a few, Juliet Sotnick, Nikki Archer have done a fantastic job of revitalizing that CIPS Foundation. So we've managed to put more funding into that than previous. And as we grow, we will continue to grow the funding into the CIPS Foundation as well. And therefore, we've been working with organizations like Unseen, ActionAid, Size of Wales, and the Children's Book Project to actually put money into that and do good in the community. And not just in the UK, look across the globe. So we've got projects going in a number of different countries now, where for me, that's probably the thing I'm most proudest of in my tenure, that we've managed to revitalize that. And we've taken money from CIPS and put it into something that really makes a difference in the community. And I want to continue to kind of grow on that foundation piece and grow it so it becomes huge and we can have a greater influence across the world. And so that people will understand what we do as a profession, but also then have a massive impact as well.
You talked about the global influence of CIPS, and CIPS is opening new offices in India, in Asia, in the Caribbean. Where do you think CIPS is in terms of influence globally?
We're certainly on the right trajectory. We've grown our membership about 5,000 over the last 3 years. So that's good news. We're up to about 68,000. It's nowhere near it should be. Going back to what I said about making CIPS more accessible, it definitely fits into kind of my key objective on making it more accessible. So we definitely view ourselves as the voice of the profession from a global perspective, and we need to act that way. And our members need to act that way as well. So, we'll be asking more members to be more ambassadors on stages and events and things like that. Ben has done a fantastic job since he has started just getting more media coverage for CIPS. And that's on very key relevant topics on, tariff wars and what's been happening in the US and disruptions on supply chains. So things that are really relevant to the profession. We've become more of a voice across different media platforms. We're also seeing increased connectivity between different members in different countries. So the fact that we can connect a member up in the Caribbean to a member in Singapore is fantastic. Last year, we launched CIPS Connect, and that in itself creates a great platform for our communities to connect, our communities to collaborate. And I think that's our role. Look, I think that's our global role. If you have a CPO in the US who is going to do business in Singapore, why wouldn't they use CIPS as their network to reach out and connect to CPOs who are based in Singapore? So we should play that role, globally, and we should absolutely accept that that's what we do. We've been doing a lot more around global webinars. We'll continue to grow those webinars, making materials more relevant from a global perspective. I said we have very much thought about kind of ourselves as a UK organisation. That's gone. And look, and that's reflected also in our board members as well. So I've made a point of consciously making sure we've got more board members from different parts of the world. So we've recently got representation from Nigeria. We have representation from different countries in the Middle East, across Europe. We're working on how we get representation from Asia. So we're trying to think a lot more globally as an organisation, because my view is we are the global voice of the profession. So we have to think globally.
And new leadership in the US as well, I believe.
Yes, yeah. I don't think we've hit our potential in the US. There is so much more we can do in the US. So as a board, we're thinking about how do we take that forward? How do we find the right ambassadors? And that in some cases might mean working on partnerships. As an example, we have a great partnership in Canada with the National Institute of Supply Chain Leaders out of Toronto, but where we built a partnership there. And I see us building more and more partnerships with different institutions in different countries. And I suspect we'll need a much stronger partnership in the US.
And one final question for you, Alison. It's estimated that there are about 13.5 million people around the world working in broadly procurement and supply chain roles. That's a large addressable market for CIPS to bring into the community and benefit from all the things that you've been talking about today. What fundamentally is your pitch to an ambitious procurement professional working wherever in the world to be part of the CIPS community? What difference could it make to them and their career?
Yeah, I would almost say if you're in the profession, why wouldn't you be part of your professional body? Why wouldn't you connect into them? We're in a world where almost the globe shrinking as people, it's a lot easier to connect across the world. We've got IT platforms that very easily help us do that. So for me, the connectivity is probably the key piece. And why wouldn't you connect into your global profession to find out what's relevant in the profession? What are the hot topics? How can I then get myself developed further into something that's more relevant to me and my business? And so that skills development, I don't believe there will be anybody out there who doesn't believe that they should be progressing and developing their own skills and growing as individuals. And we are the obvious place to come and do that as your professional body and make sure that we provide you the tools for you to go and do your job. I would also go back to what I said about the foundation. CIPS is a charity, so why would you choose CIPS and not maybe another professional organisation. And partly is because we are a charity. We don't want this at the profit. So we take some of that membership fee and we invest it into doing good for the planet as well. And that's, everything I talked about with some of the charities we're dealing with, but also supporting volunteers into schools, volunteers into other areas that we can really make a difference. And that's it. To me, that's almost gives us a sense of purpose. So that gives us a sense of purpose around some of the other organizations that don't have that. And the fact that we can provide all this great stuff around developing your skills, connecting you across the world, but also part of your fees are going into the charitable part of the business. And it's really driving changes across the world.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. Thank you. If, in case you're interested, there was a podcast that we did just recently about the work of the CIPS Foundation. So do check that out on the CIPS Futures podcast hub. Alison, thank you so much for today. It's been a really interesting conversation and a positive one, I think. And I'm pretty sure I can speak on behalf of the CIPS community to say thank you for all of your contributions over the past 10 years. It's been great to share some of the reflections with you. So thank you very much and good luck with the next stage of your own career.
Thank you.
So that's it for this episode of Futures. Huge thanks to Alison Barto. If you're a regular listener, please do share this with your colleagues, teams and network. This podcast has been brought to you by CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. For now, though, that's it from me. See you next time.